Well, gun sales have soared since March when the coronavirus pandemic led to the shutdown of many cities. Federal background checks hit a record high of nearly 4 million in June and were higher in July and August compared to the same months last year. Now, besides the pandemic, the spike is linked to protests and the upcoming presidential election. So for more on the role of politics in the U.S. gun industry, I'm now joined by Josh Enomoto. Josh is a contributor for InvestorPlace and emerginggrowth.com. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
So explain to our audience the influence of the gun industry when it comes to U.S. politics.
Well, the one fact that you have to keep in mind when it comes to guns in America is that there are more guns than there are people in this country, and that's a dubious distinction that only we have in the world. And so both Democrats and Republicans have to be very careful in how they approach the Second Amendment. And that's especially the case this year when you're seeing these record sales. Just as an example, in June and July, the average year-over-year sales growth is 75%, which is a metric that we've never seen before.
And we did see that when the coronavirus pandemic hit the U.S. in March, we saw the FBI processed 3.7 million firearm background checks, the most since they started keeping records. And that record just kept being broken every month, 3 months later. So discuss surging sales amid the pandemic, this combination then with the protests, as well as a roller coaster economy.
Yeah, so one of the biggest catalysts actually for the rise in gun sales during this pandemic is panic purchases by Asian Americans. You really have to appreciate the setup here. For millions of Americans, you've lost your job, you can't put food on the table, you're struggling to support your family, and you're looking for answers. And President Trump comes in here and he says, I know what the problem is. It's the China virus, or it's the Chinese virus. And in this context, I think it's similar to yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. Is the word fire by itself a dangerous word? No, absolutely not. But in context, it can be incredibly dangerous. And right now, we have social unrest. We have an economic crisis. We have millions of people that are facing eviction risks. It is grossly irresponsible to racialize the coronavirus situation. And Asian Americans, they inherently recognize this, and that's why you're seeing this tremendous, unprecedented spike in gun sales.
So you mentioned Asian Americans. How else has the demographic of gun buyers really changed in recent years?
Well, typically, when you have when you're in an election year, gun sales have a counterintuitive relationship. So when Democrats take over, there's an inherent spike across all demographics to buy guns simply because of fears that the liberals will impose strict gun control measures. When Republicans take over, typically you'll see a decline in sales because the incentive just isn't there. Now, this year, we may see some of these old rules just be completely thrown out the window. Right now, every demographic has an incentive to buy firearms because, look, everybody is buying firearms. And when you look at gun retailers, it's standing room only. They've got lines going out for several blocks. People want guns. And in this environment, you don't want to be, when everybody else is buying guns, you don't want to be the only one not to have a gun. I look at it as mutually assured destruction on a smaller individual scale.
Certainly scary stuff. But it's interesting, despite the rising sales, there's also financial trouble among gun makers. We saw Remington file for bankruptcy for the second time. What is the status of the actual sector, though, when we take a closer look?
Yeah, so Remington is an interesting case because there are certain gun manufacturers that have problems that are unique to them. So for Remington, they've been hounded with accusations of product defects. Also, Remington's Bushmaster AR-15 has generated negative headlines because of its association with certain mass shooting events. That being said, the sector is incredibly robust. So one great example is Big 5 Sporting Goods. This is for years, it's been an irrelevant company in an irrelevant sector. But when the pandemic struck, people rushed to Big 5 because they were one of the mainstream retailers that actually sold firearms.
And just quickly, we have about 20 seconds. Talk about the NRA's legal battles and the financial toll that that's taking.
I think this is an opportunity for conservatives to look themselves in the mirrors. It's a similar situation to what you find with evangelical American Christianity, where leaders are preaching one thing but are practicing another. And typically conservatives love to blame other people like immigrants, communities of color. This is an opportunity to really say that it may be the conservatives themselves that are causing their own problems.